Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Saturday, the 13th day of July, 2024. And as always, we have some very important stories to bring to you that are taking place right now that are fulfilling precisely what the Bible says our world is going to be like at the time of the end. Now, on Breaking News, this is what we do every day. We go to the Bible first and find out what it says the world is going to be like before the coming of Christ and the events associated with it, then bring you the stories that fit precisely with what it says. Now, what I'm going to do on our second program today, we do two breaking news every day, is basically go through my book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. I probably should have done this before, and I'll do it again periodically, and just take about 15 minutes, go through each of the 25 signs and explains how they're all falling into place today in such a miraculous way. Because what we have here is God in His Word giving us through different authors living at different times in history, basically a puzzle that's going to take place in the last days, and various pieces will fit in before the second coming of Christ. We see one author here writing about it, one author there, sometimes centuries apart, but we see it all miraculously falling into place. And this way, when we do these stories every day, we want you not only to see the stories in light of what they are, but also in light of what the Bible predicts we should expect to see at the time of the end. And not only it'll increase your faith, it'll be amazing. And then what you can do, and what I've always encouraged audiences to do, when you see certain stories, please say, hey, that fits sign number 18, or that fits sign number 9, or whatever it might be, because it'll increase not only your faith in the Lord, but it'll show you we can have confidence that God is going to come through with everything He has promised. So anyway, we'll be doing that later today. And we've got four actually signs today that we are seeing being fulfilled in these top three stories. So let's look at them. Our top story concerns the possible elimination of Hamas's number two man in Gaza. This is a huge story, Mohammad Deif. If true, it would be a monumental achievement. The other main target, Sinwar, seems to be realizing that the end is near, hence the negotiations. And there's something about this story we're going to bring out to you, which is important to understand what's going on in light of Bible prophecy. And finally, it's becoming more and more evident the Jews are not welcome in Europe any longer. The continent continues to become Islamicized, or however you want to say it. In other words, Islam takes over the continent, and when that happens, Jews are certainly unwelcome. That fits also, as we're going to see, one of our 25 sides. So let's look at them, because each of these stories is important with respect to what the Bible says about Israel and the last days. And remember, Israel is God's timepiece. That's why we look at it first and foremost. The nation is the hour hand, the city of Jerusalem is the minute hand, and the Temple Mount is the second hand, God's clock and His timepiece for this world. All right, headline number one. Israeli strike on Gaza targets and likely kills Hamas leader Mohammad Deif. The IDF says dozens of those killed in the strike on Deif were active Hamas terrorists. Mohammad Deif, the leader of the al-Qassam Brigades, he's the leader of Hassan's military wing, was targeted in an airstrike in Khan Yunis area of southern Gaza. Israel's army radio reported on Saturday. A senior source noted that there was a high likelihood that Deif was killed in the strike, but that the confirmation was, as of yet, not forthcoming, according to Israeli broadcaster KAN. In a joint IDF and ISA activity, the IDF Southern Command and the Israeli Air Force struck an area where two senior Hamas terrorists and additional terrorists were hiding among civilians. The IDF later reported the location of the strike was an open area surrounded by trees, several buildings, and sheds. Israeli media reported that Rafa Salama, the commander of Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade, was also a target of the Israeli strike. The Saudi news outlet Al-Hadath later reported that Salama had been killed. Now, it's unclear if Deif was hit in the strike, and his current status is unknown. Still, the IDF told Army Radio that lots of preparation had gone into the strike, and the strike itself was very precise, and that intelligence provided open a window of opportunity mere hours beforehand. Army radio correspondent Doron Kadosh reported that a security source noted that, as far as was known, no hostages were held at the scene of the strike. An additional two security sources reportedly stated that the attempted elimination of Deif occurred while the Hamas leader was above ground, as opposed to where he's almost always staying, inside a tunnel. Army radio added that Deif and Salama had been hiding in a building near tents of displaced persons in the area. Citing security officials, Army radio stated that the IDF estimated there will likely be dozens killed as a result of the strike, but carried out the strike nevertheless. Later, however, the Israeli outlet, citing an IDF assessment, reported that dozens of those killed in the strike were active Hamas terrorists who served as security for Deif and Salama. The prime minister's, remember this is Shabbat, so all the news is quiet now from Israel. We're just getting these special reports coming out because until the Sabbath's over, we can't get any details. The prime minister's office released a short statement about the attempted elimination, confirming that the prime minister gave a standing directive at the beginning of the war to eliminate senior Hamas officials. He was updated on all developments during the night and continues to receive regular updates. The Prime Minister will conduct a situational assessment today with all the security forces and the National Security Council to discuss the next developments and steps. Earlier, a senior Hamas official said on Israeli army radio that the reported strike on Gaza's Khan Yunis on Saturday had targeted military chief Mohammad Deif was nonsense. And he goes on to say, well, all the martyrs were civilians, and it's a grave escalation of the war of genocide backed by American support and world silence. This is the spokesman for Hamas. He told Reuters, adding that the attack showed Israel was not interested in reaching a ceasefire agreement. Anyway, in the wake of the strike, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, IDF Chief of Staff Herzl Halevi, and Shin Bet, Israeli Security Agency head Ronan Bar convened an operational situation assessment, Khan Radio reported. Other reports indicated a heavy IDF assault on terrorists operating in southern Gaza also commenced on Saturday morning. All right. Now, if this is true, this is a great achievement because this is the number 2 guy there in Gaza that they wanted to get. Sinwar is number 1, Deif is number 2. They've been after this murderer for years. This man is typical of so many over the years whose intense hatred for the Jews caused his life to be dedicated to one thing, and that is their extinction. He is a big fish, and it looks like this big fish is going to be no longer working like he has been day and night for decades in his desire to rid the world of the state of Israel. So again, a huge story, if true, and it seems to be true. All right. Now, what we have in our second headline, a change in the Sinwar's position, it seems. A commentator says Sinwar is feeling the pressure to make a deal. Now, we're going to show how this all fits in with what we just said and what we're talking about God working here at the telling us ahead of time at the signs of the end what we would expect to see. Arab Affairs commentator Avi Isherkov discusses the deal prospects for hostages on Udi Siegel and Anat Davido's radio show, unveiling the hidden drama, and this is what's interesting, about Sinwar's unexpected peak. The radio commentator was interviewed recently on this program to discuss Hamas's position on the hostage deal. Here's what Ishakar stated. There has been a change in Hamas's position, which we have noted here. They are showing a willingness to go to an agreement without knowing in advance if we go to a complete ceasefire. Hamas no longer demands what it demanded at the beginning. There is flexibility. There are several considerations here, one of which is the military pressure taking its toll. Now, this was before Deif got knocked off. Hamas is not immune to social pressure, so it may be that they are ready for some kind of early, easy compromise. Now, he adds this. The mediators, Egypt and Qatar, with the encouragement of the Americans, are putting a lot of pressure on Hamas. The bottom line is that it seems to me that Sinwar realizes he has reached a certain peak a few months ago. And here's the key, in terms of achievements and in the opinion of the international public, and now he's starting to see a decline. The same demonstrations in Europe influence the opinion of the international audience. Now, this last statement is the key to our understanding the purpose of October 7th, as well as the current situation of Israel with these events. He saw the international public, their opinion, how it came out against Israel, but now he's seeing a decline, the demonstrations. All right. This fits 2 of our signs of the last days, as documented in our book, 25 Signs We're Near the End. First of all, the miracles of Israel's survival. It's miraculous that they've even existed, to this day. But then number 2, they not only miraculously existed in the last days, sign number 3, they miraculously returned to their ancient homeland in the last days. So we find in our first 2 signs, Israel still exists. The descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still exist at the time of the end, as the Bible predicts. and then miraculously, for a second time, return to their ancient homeland after almost 1900 years. Now, along with this, the next story will confirm another two of our 25 biblical signs. Sign number 4, the nation will return in 2 stages. And sign 21, there'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel. So now we're seeing, like we saw what this man said about the public opinions doing its work, we're seeing what's taking place because of that in headline number 3, and that is this. As Europe becomes Islamized, Jews should jump ship and move to Israel. This is an opinion piece, and this is the sort of thing we would expect to see at the time of the end, the Jews coming back in mass to their ancient homeland. And here's how the article reads. The changing face of Europe leaves the Jews of Europe with no way out. They have but one insurance policy, Israel's law of return. Over the past month, 3 important elections were held in Europe, one on Sunday in France, last week in the United Kingdom, and about a month ago in the European Union Parliament. The results marks an inflection point in an ongoing process that cast a pall over the future of the Jews in Europe. In the 19th century, the Jewish people were distinctly European. Europe was home to 90% of the world's Jews at the time of the First Zionist Congress. Today, only about 9% of the Jews live there, about 1.25 million. At the same time, Europe is being Islamized at a rapid pace. Over 5% of the European Union residents are Muslims, 1 in 20. And the continued massive immigration and high Muslim birth rate in Europe, 3 times that of other Europeans, indicate a clear demographic trend. The increasing power of Islam in Europe is fueling 2 major political trends. One is a significant and fierce counter-movement of those alarmed by the phenomenon. This is a key driver of the incredible growth of the far-right parties all over Europe. The center-right has also grown, but the far-right is becoming stronger in a way unmatched since World War II. In response to this, an opposite political trend, and we've talked about this, is evident. The center is threatened by the right, is looking for allies on the left, and sometimes on the extreme left. Indeed, the global trend of an eroding political center in face of extreme movements on the right and on the left appear to be the current European zeitgeist, or spirit of the age. These are the facts. In the first round of the French elections, Le Pen's far-right National Rally Party received nearly 1/3 of the votes cast, and the distinctive anti-Israel far-left New National Front came in second. Macron's centrist party, the Ensemble Party, trailed in 3rd place. In order to preserve its power, the center decided to embrace the far left in the second and final round this past Sunday, and that's what we saw take place. So this far left party actually received more seats in the government there of France because of the work that they did with Macron. And so the results are particularly bad. The alliance of left-wing parties headed by an Israel hater with anti-Semitic proclivities has become the largest faction in the parliament there in France. One senses a heavy cloud of political and social uncertainty hanging over the republic, and one of the groups that will suffer under it is, of course, the Jews. So the changing face of Europe, the article goes on to say, leaves the Jews of Europe with no way out. The far right threatens them with the force of classical anti-Semitic tropes, which has been suppressed in recent decades, but now permits itself to resurface and show its ugly face. The far left threatens them with a modern strain of anti-Semitism, motivated by the hatred of the state of Israel and fueled by what? By the war in Gaza. In other words, Hamas has reached the goals that they were attempting to reach. That's why they're ready to pull out, cease fire. Now, the elections in France demonstrate this lack of a way out for the French Jews when they went to the polls last Sunday. They had to choose, as this author says, between pestilence and boils, between the far right and a center that has forged an alliance with the far left. All right, so here's the key. They're back in the land. They go back because the persecution is occurring everywhere. This is expected according to Scripture, namely the rise of anti-Semitism, their isolation, sign 21 of our 25 signs, and the war in Gaza has only made it much worse for them, even though they are the victims. And sign 4, they will return to Israel in the last days on their own, a natural return, although it's supernaturally guided by the Lord to set the stage for the events that are going to take place in the future, including the final 7-year period before the second coming of Christ. All these things are coming together right now. It all fits. So this is the puzzle that we see that the Bible tells us about, and the pieces fitting together, setting the stage for what's going to happen at the time of the end, the events that have been predicted, and then, of course, culminating in the second coming of Christ. And that's why we want you, as we tell you these stories every twice a day, to see the stories in light of the total overall program of God, what He's laid out throughout the years through these various human authors telling us, divinely inspired, what's going to happen at the time of the end of this age before God's kingdom comes to earth. So it's very exciting to see these stories come together. So the three stories today all buttress the proof that the Bible is what it claims to be, the word of the living God. Israel's there, they're back in the land, they're isolated, they're hated, but it's a miracle they still exist, and it's a double miracle. They're miraculously back as a modern state some 76 years after its founding in 1948. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Like I said, what we'll do, unless there's some type of monumental story that breaks later, when we do our second edition of 25 Signs today, or excuse me, of breaking news, we'll do the 25 signs. We'll just go through them briefly, but then that'll give you that overview and something you can look at time and time again and put these various stories we see every day into context. All right, until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.